Well, hello, I'm Joe Spina, and welcome to the Joe Show, where truth is our mission, reality our realm, says we see it, and frankly as well. From the steppes, the great steppes to the Great Plains, it was about an 800-year journey, and it has to do with the hamburger, kind of a metaphor. So let's get right into it. The hamburger made a long journey from the Eurasian steppes when the Mongols, led by Genghis Khan and his grandson, Kublai Khan, are said to have introduced raw chopped meat or mincemeat to the Russians, particularly when Kublai Khan stormed Moscow 800 years ago. Some historians say, wait a second, the groundwork for the hamburger actually began 10,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, present-day Iraq, Syria, with the domestication of cattle. Back to Russia. The tenderized meat that the Mongols introduced to Moscow was called steak tatar. Tatar is another word that means Mongol. It took 400 years before the mincemeat, Russian steak tatar, was brought to Germany by sailors to the port city of Hamburg, after which it became quite a European delicacy. Actually, Hamburg was well known for being high-quality meat, exporting high-quality meat to the rest of Europe in that time frame. The Germans added a little spice or some spices, and they shredded the meat. And they actually gave you the option of whether you want to eat it raw or have it cooked. So as you can see, this is an evolutionary process taking place over hundreds of years. By the 18th century, it was fully embraced by the Germans. Steak tartare, that is, became popular, very popular. And when visiting sailors came to Hamburg, Germany, they delighted in what they considered a delicacy, and they named it and coined the term Hamburg steak. Now, there's a subject to debate of when the real, in capitals, real hamburger was created, mostly meaning by real hamburger, they meant a meaty pat or a meat patty placed between bread. There is no doubt that the first version was brought to the United States by immigrants with an E, left Germany on the German Hamburg American lifeboat during the 1850s. Now, because of the long journey, and they didn't have refrigeration back then, they had to salt and smoke the meat into patties, and they served it between two pieces of bread. By 1873, that particular delicacy, whatever you want to call it, had landed on the menu of New York City's famous Delmonico restaurant, our menu item. In the late 19th century, there was a fellow named Dr. James Henry Salisbury. Does that name sound familiar? Well, he prescribed chopped beef patties to cure Civil War soldiers who were suffering from what they call camp diarrhea, which is kind of interesting because when my dog Luigi got sick and I brought him to the doctors, he was, vomiting and had all kinds of problems. They prescribed boiling chopped or hamburger along with rice to cure his digestive problems. So maybe Salisbury was onto something. In fact, Dr. Salisbury advocating eating meat 3 times a day in order to have a healthy constitution, which pretty much runs counter to what, today everybody wants to be a vegan or a vegetarian. Oh, no more red meat. Goes to show you, times change. Anyway, Dr. Salisbury is famous for the Salisbury steak, which I used to like when I was a kid. I don't eat so much of it now, but actually, the idea, the concept of the modern hamburger, now this is like 700 years later, is happened at the St. Louis World's Fair, and it just kind of took off. And that was in 1904. White Castle has the distinction of opening the very first hamburger stand in Wichita, Kansas, which is kind of interesting because Kansas, or Wichita, Kansas, is a Great Plains city, and steak tartare came from the Great Plains of the steppes by the Mongols and the Eurasian landmass. Everything seems to go from east to west, civilization, movement. That's the thing that perfects humankind. Movement, intermingling, not this separation and isolation. The natural course of mankind is to evolve, to intermingle, to interact. And sometimes in modern society, we tend to be going in the opposite direction. Instead of putting the fabric together and actually celebrating this thing called diversity, it seems otherwise, which is why I brought up the topic of the hamburger. So after White Castle, and they came out in Wichita City in 1921. That was followed by McDonald's in 1948, right after World War II. And the rest is history. Today, now get this, today, over 50 billion with a B, 50 billion hamburgers are consumed by Americans each year. The hamburger stands as a metaphor for the natural evolution and perfection of civilization. The hamburger is the culmination of many races, ethnicities, cultures, and civilizations intermingling and interacting with one another to create something universal or universally accepted, despite our human differences. On that, have a good one.